Imagine the cloak and dagger world of the medieval assassin, where every shadow could conceal a life-altering secret or a deadly intent. Tonight we delve into the dark, perilous, and far from glamorous life of those who wielded blades in the dead of night, shaping history with whispers and steel. Hollywood might glamorize them, but the truth of their existence is stark and sobering. Before you settle in, if my journey through time captivates, you show your support with a like or a subscription. And tell me, where are you watching from? What time is it where you are? It's always thrilling to connect with our global community. Now, as the lights dim and perhaps a fan hums softly in the background, let us journey back together. Let's be honest, no one in medieval times aspired to the life of an assassin. No one dreamed of creeping through the night to end a life for a handful of silver coins and the dubious honor of hiding in a barrel for days. Becoming an assassin was not a career choice. It was often the last desperate option on a path where life had taken a wrong turn. These were not the enigmatic figures of myth trained in secluded mountain temples. Instead, they were the desperate peasants with nothing to lose, soldiers who had fallen from grace, former thieves with a knack for stealth, or individuals so marginalized they could commit murder and remain unnoticed by the census. If you had wealth or status, you didn't become an assassin, you hired one. If you owned land or even a goat, you were part of the management, not the muscle. But if you were a recent escapee from the gallows, known for your problem-solving skills and could slip into a tavern unnoticed, then beware, somewhere someone was about to slide a purse of coins your way, whispering a name that would change everything. Ah, the name itself was hardly a joyous one, was it? You weren't dispatched to handle Bob the gentle turnip farmer, were you? No, your targets were often the corrupt baron, the bishop dripping in gold, or some nefarious figure surrounded by 12 bodyguards and a moat. The compensation was tempting, yes, but the task itself utterly terrifying. By the time one contemplated such a job, they had nothing left to lose, no family, no future, and certainly no dental plan. And let's not even start on the lack of job perks. No pension awaited you, no glory, no peaceful evenings off. You couldn't exactly advertise your services with a quaint sign saying quiet eliminations by appointment. You had to remain silent, move with haste, and above all, keep your occupation a secret. Imagine trying to discuss it over a tankard of ale at the inn. Oh, what do? I'm a traveling carpet seller. The stains a dye. Indeed, nobody aspired to become a medieval assassin. They stumbled into this grim profession because the world had chewed them up and spat them out, cloaked in a hood, clutching a rusty dagger. You were neither the hero of this tale nor the villain. You were the unsettling footnote that made everyone uneasy, and chances were you wouldn't live long enough to enjoy your ill-gotten gains. Let's shatter the first myth right here. Medieval assassins didn't train in candlelit monasteries under the guidance of wise mentors, with inspirational flute music playing softly in the background. There were no montages, no mentors, no motivational speeches. If you learned anything, it was through sheer survival, the art of not dying during your initial clumsy attempts. Most weren't trained professionals. They were desperate amateurs who could navigate well and knew how to ascend silently without a sneeze giving them away. If you had military experience, splendid, you at least knew how to wield a knife correctly. If not, well, stabbing someone is somewhat instinctive, but escaping with both kidneys intact. Now that requires skill or sheer luck. Usually, imagine stepping into the shadowy world of assassination with nothing but your wits and a heart full of ambition. No guidebooks, no welcoming handshakes from a guild, no whispered safety tips. You were thrust into this dark dance without any formal schooling on how to distinguish a noble from their doppelganger or locate the secret exits in grand estates. Instead, you found yourself precariously balanced on a window ledge, heart-pounding, wondering if you'd mistakenly entered the servants' quarters again. Poisoning was an art of guesswork where the line between success and disaster was as thin as the blade of your dagger. Sometimes your concoction worked like a charm. Other times your target would merely wobble, eyeing their soup with newfound suspicion. And yes, there were moments when you, in a twist of fate, drank from the wrong cup with no medieval poison control to call upon just sheer hope, a bit of herbal knowledge, and a stomach of steel. If fortune smiled upon you, perhaps you'd learned a trick or two from the rogues and mercenaries that roamed the taverns. An old assassin might have taught you the silent way to tread on cobblestones, but such mentorship was fleeting, like a ghost in the night. Assassins didn't retire. They vanished into the mist of their own legends. Forget about formal weapons training. You weren't wielding a broadsword. Your arsenal was modest a dagger, perhaps pilfered from a careless guard, a garrote, if you felt particularly audacious, and anything else that could be concealed beneath your cloak without making a sound. You were no master of martial arts, but a man with calloused hands, silent steps, and an intimate, albeit unhealthy relationship with the alleyways of the city. Your education was raw and unforgiving, devoid of pomp and circumstance. It was all about survival. You learned the grim art of killing through hasty, messy deeds, followed by a swift disappearance before your likeness could be captured and posted on church doors. Why did you choose this path? The allure was simple yet profound coin. Cold, heavy, jingly, wonderfully spendable coin. The promise of wealth, the thrill of danger, that's what drew you in. But there was more to this tale, a deeper motivation that stirred within you, urging you forward into the darkness. Fun. In the dark underbelly of reality, your payment came not in gold, but in deception. When a client engages an assassin, they're not seeking a bond that lasts. They desire a swift anonymous act, a transaction devoid of records or lingering witnesses, especially you. They might dangle a pouch of silver before your eyes half in advance, the rest upon completion, should their mood be so inclined. But here lies the catch: when the job is done, translates to a chilling code. It means only after they have confirmed your silence, your efficiency, and your anonymity. You tread the path of the shadow, your life hanging by a thread, perhaps slaying a baron in his slumber. It's neither pretty nor poetic. Upon your return, you're met with excuses, or worse, treachery, a dagger aimed at your gut, a stark reminder that betrayal is cheaper than a bonus. And should you be fortunate enough to receive your due, it's a paltry sum insufficient for the peril, face the blood, shed the days spent in a flea-infested haystack, wrestling with your conscience. A handful of coins, a fleeting nod, and a stark reminder you were never here. Consider this: some contracts were mere illusions, political snares set by cunning minds. You're instructed to eliminate a formidable foe only to confront a decoy surrounded by guards. Suddenly you find yourself ensnared in a trap, your name already etched on the gallows. And in the rare event the contract was genuine, where could you seek justice? Your Honor, I wish to sue Lord Edmund for breach of assassin contract. The only courtroom you'd see would be one where you were not the plaintiff, but the exhibit. Thus you learned to snatch what you could demand payment in advance and trust in absolutely no one. Ah, the life of an assassin, glamorized by stories, yet so far from the truth. Not even the oily little scribe with his promises that this job would be your ticket to a new life could have prepared you for this. Yes, it did change your life, but not in the way you might have hoped. Instead of a gilded path to fortune, you found yourself on a narrow, shadowy road where the end seemed all too near. You've accepted the role, trusting in the whispers of wealth and adventure, only to realize the bitter truth: the pay was a lie, and your life expectancy. Well, it's hanging by a thread. Let's delve into the reality of your gear. Shall we forget the tales of fantasy with their hidden blades and mystical poisons? Your arsenal was far from the stuff of legends. There were no enchanted daggers or wrist blades that could vanish at a flick of the wrist. Instead, your toolkit was a collection of whatever you could pilfer, sharpen, or conceal beneath a ragged cloak without making a sound. If fortune smiled upon you, say if you found a gold coin in the boot of a corpse, you might have possessed a decent dagger, not one with ornate engravings or the curve of a dragon's tooth, but one that was simply sharp, hopefully free of rust, and not reeking of its last victim. Poison, yes, it was part of the game, but not in the sophisticated manner of a slow, deliberate drip into a chalice of wine. Medieval concoctions were capricious, derived from plants, minerals, or even the insides of toads. Some poisons acted swiftly, others lingered, tormenting their victims with hours of agony or days of sickness, leaving them wary of every meal thereafter. Ropes occasionally handy for strangling, climbing, or securing something or someone, but woe betide you if you fumbled in the moment, whispering to yourself, which knot goes where again? And bows, those were effective if you had one, if you knew how to shoot, and if you weren't trying to sneak one through a palace while masquerading as a florist. Most of your work was close, personal, and anything but graceful. No time for a marksman's finesse, just the cold, hard necessity of being quick, silent, and if you could manage it, not too messy. And remember, there were no backups. If your blade bent or broke, if your rope tangled, or if your poison failed to work, there was no one to call for a replacement. You were alone with only your wits and whatever makeshift tools you could muster. So as you navigate this perilous path, ask yourself, is this the life you envisioned, or has the reality of the assassin's trade shattered the illusions you once held dear? Or perhaps you found yourself tumbling down a well, a stark reminder that fate is ever the jester in your grim ballet of shadows. Improvise you must a slate, roof tile, a rusty nail, perhaps even a shoe buckle, wielded with deadly intent. Desperate times call for desperate measures. You concealed your tools cleverly tucked into hems hidden in boots, or even within the deceptive safety of a hollowed-out loaf of bread. These weren't just tools. They were your confidants, your masters, your only assurance of a future, if any. There were no luxuries like upgrades or time for maintenance between missions. You didn't polish your gear. You hoped it wouldn't fail you in the critical moment, for, in the end, it wasn't the weapon that delivered the blow. It was you armed with nothing but a spoon and a prayer, expected to perform miracles. Assassins weren't dispatched for petty squabbles or to rid the world of insignificant figures. No one paid to have Jeff the drowsy candlemaker dispatched. Your quarry was of consequence: nobles, bishops, military officers, occasionally even royalty. These were not easy targets to eliminate. First, there were the guards, dozens of them, well-armed, well-armored, and nourished. Some stood vigilant at the front, others at the back, their presence alone a warning. You'd spend countless hours studying their patterns, the creak of a door, the exact number of steps before the asthmatic guard paused for breath. Then there were the fortifications. Castles didn't invite with a welcome mat. They were fortresses with gates, murder holes, and moats teeming with predators. Even if you avoided a watery grave, you had to contend with arrow slits and the threat of boiling oil. Yes, boiling oil. Your job description might as well have read, "May get flambéed for a glance." Lastly, the castle's inhabitants, the servants, the cooks, the scribes, the stable boys. One misplaced glance, one moment of hesitation, and they'd be whispering to the guard captain before you could utter, "I'm just the herbalist." The assassins of yore didn't merely duel with swords. They battled with whispers, with rumors that spread like wildfire across the medieval landscape, each tale told in hopes of saving one's own neck. Oh, how treacherous was the path they tread. Imagine your target ever so paranoid, and with good reason, enveloped by a sea of deceit, surrounded by kin, coveting their crowns, and an entourage of sycophants, each smile a potential betrayal. They dined with a food taster at hand, secured their slumber behind 3 bolted doors, some even opting for decoy beds or a nightly shuffle of sleeping quarters, akin to a game of deadly musical chairs. And do not rejoice too quickly at the news of a royal feast. Yes, the target might be inebriated, but so would you, and still you'd face the daunting challenge of bypassing the elite guards, the ever-watchful jester, and a throng of 50 potential witnesses, each clutching their tankards. The approach could take weeks, involving masquerading as a servant, bribing a chambermaid, or even secreting oneself within the confines of barrels. When the moment for action finally arrived, it was a singular, flawless, silent, and bloodless opportunity to vanish into the night or face the grim fate of becoming a public spectacle, a warning to others dangling from the castle gate with a sign that chillingly declared, "Nice try." Let us dispel the romantic notions of medieval assassins. Gone are the images of sleek, black-robed figures with leather braces and mysterious hoods billowing in the moonlight. Reality painted a different picture, one of a sickly goat herder with secrets to keep. Disguises in those times were far from the realm of high fashion. You wore what you could find: peasant rags and oversized monk's robe, or perhaps the remnants of a guard's uniform, still pungent with its former occupant's scent. The objective: to blend seamlessly into the background, to look like just another soul who hadn't bathed in weeks, hobbled by old wounds and twitched with the nervous energy of the malnourished. The cloak you wore didn't arouse suspicion. Rather, it was your constant fidgeting with your belt trying to conceal a dagger swaddled in cheesecloth that set off alarms. Forget about masks. There were no stylish Guy Fawkes options to blend in. Most face coverings merely cast you in the shadow of a leper, perfect for dodging unwanted chatter, but disastrous for gaining entry to high society gatherings. Should anyone inquire about your identity, you needed to conjure a persona on the spot. I'm Brother Tobias, dedicated to silent prayer and the upkeep of rooftops. Even if you managed to slip past the watchful eyes of the guards, the noble households were not populated by fools. Servants had an uncanny knack for spotting unfamiliar faces, particularly those who couldn't even handle a chamber pot or recall the name of the cook's cat. You were always just one, "I've never seen you before," away from a swift knock over the head with a candlestick. And should your disguise hold up, congratulations were in order. Now you had to maintain that role for hours, all while feigning ignorance to the myriad of potential threats milling about. Wigas, they were a fantasy. If you needed to appear older or younger, you'd smear dirt on your face, squint and pray. No one approached close enough to notice your beard was affixed with nothing but honey. The harsh truth was your disguise offered you perhaps a fleeting 5 minutes of bewilderment. Beyond that, you needed to vanish, become utterly invisible, or be incredibly persuasive. And if someone pierced through your facade, well, imagine the horror of being the assassin found in the bishop's laundry room, clad in a nun's habit and clutching a sword, especially on a feast day. In those medieval times, as an assassin, you had no team, no sidekick with a crossbow, no clever alchemist in a hidden lair, nor a handler offering coded scrolls and a comforting pat on the back. You had only yourself and a rusty dagger. In the shadowy world of medieval assassins, trust was a luxury none could afford. Guilds. They were but whispers, fleeting rumors, in taverns often sparked by the boredom of men like me. The idea of a brotherhood of killers was as elusive as a ghost in the dead of night. You were more likely to encounter a specter than a fellow professional eager to network. Why such solitude, you might wonder? Because in this grim trade, anonymity was your lifeline. Every acquaintance posed a threat, every loose word a potential noose around your neck. Even your clients often knew you only by a moniker, and if they ever learned your true identity, your escape was already in motion. Companionship, it was a jest, a cruel irony. Friends pried, lovers observed the telltale signs of your perilous life, the bruises, the blood stains, the dagger, ever present beneath your pillow. Settling down impossible, one slip, one familiar face in a bustling market, and your existence would devolve into a desperate dash toward the nearest sewer grate. Even among the underworld's denizens, thieves and smugglers who reveled in camaraderie, you were an anomaly. You were the specter who made people vanish feared or seen as a harbinger of doom. No one dared share a bowl of stew with someone whose very presence could summon an angry mob with torches. Sympathy was a scarce commodity. How could you convey the haunting solitude of your existence, the sleepless nights following the silent dispatch of a corrupt bishop? Speaking of your deeds branded you as either a liar or a menace, and often they were right. Thus you harbored your secrets, your scars, and your silent weapons. In taverns, you'd choose the darkest corner, your back always to the wall, your gaze ever vigilant on the door. Never indulging in excess, never lingering more than a night, and your name was a commodity disclosed only after payment, and even then it was seldom your true one. Ah, the life of a medieval assassin, how solitary, how profound, how utterly alone. Imagine you've mastered the art of disappearing, not just blending into the crowd, but erasing yourself from the myriad lives you could have lived. You've accepted the job, meticulously mapped your route, bribed the crucial doorman, and transformed into an utterly convincing chimney sweep. But then at the crucial moment you freeze. Perhaps your target turned unexpectedly, or they were there with their child, or perhaps your hand meant to wield, the knife trembled like a leaf in a storm. And what happens? You're as good as dead. In the medieval world, failure for an assassin wasn't just a career hiccup or a mark on your record. It was a sentence to a spectacle of public agony involving ropes, flames, wheels, or vicious iron contraptions with names that sent chills down the spine. Missing your mark meant the entire mission crumbled. Your target, now very much alive, would broadcast the attempt on their life. Suddenly, your cloak of invisibility slips. You're no longer a ghost, but a marked man, your likeness crudely sketched and plastered across every tavern wall within 30 miles. And those guards you so cleverly evaded. Now they're on high alert, driven by vengeance. But it's not just the target or the law you need to fear. Your own client could become your biggest threat. Fail and you transform from an asset into a liability ripe for interrogation or worse. The very hands that paid you might now sign your death warrant. No, there were no do-overs, no, I'll get it right next time. You had one moment, one shot, blow it, and the best you could pray for was a swift end before your identity and that of your employer was exposed. And let's not forget the shame, the quiet gnawing kind that eats away at your soul. You didn't just fail at your task, you failed at being the shadow, the silent hand of justice or vengeance. You became the story, the whispered tale of what not to do, the cautionary legend in the dark corners of every assassin's guild. To vanish into thin air, to be flawless in every move, this was the creed of the medieval assassin. For them, perfection was not just a goal, it was survival. Fall short, and you might as well have painted a bullseye on your back, ready to deliver your final words. It didn't matter how many successful missions you had under your belt. No one cared about your 12 triumphs. In this deadly profession, you were only as good as your last kill. Miss that mark and you'd better start sprinting. You did it though. The plan unfolded like a dark symphony, the dagger finding its mark with chilling precision. No cries pierced the night, no guards stormed in, just a silent fall, and a figure of importance now reduced to nothing. Bravo. But hold your applause for now, the real challenge begins. Being a triumphant assassin in medieval times was no leisurely stroll or a chance to savor victory from a rooftop while the city burned below. Instead, it meant hurtling through shadowed alleyways, boots stained with the blood of your deed, with a hound already hot on your trail. There was no time for celebration, no toast with fellow killers, no casual review with the client. The moment your blade whispered through flesh, your mission instantly transformed into an escape from those who now sought your life with inventive vengeance. Guards were on the move, doors, barricaded, horses tied far across town. Perhaps you were wounded, your own blood mingling with that of your victim. You had to orchestrate your escape as meticulously as the kill itself. Routes memorized, disguises, prepared fallback safe houses ready. Maybe a boatman who owed you a favor, or one who simply didn't ask questions, knowing the city would soon be locked down. No one wanted a scandal. Lockdown meant sealed gates, armed patrols, and a dozen men with swords, all bearing your likeness, and the warning, possibly armed and extremely dangerous. And what of the client, assuming they intended to honor their payment? They certainly wouldn't be waiting for you at the thrill of a job well done in a cozy tavern, a smile on your face, a thank you card in hand, and then poof, gone like a wisp of smoke. That's the life of an assassin, the most perilous profession known to man. You knew too much had access to forbidden places, so even when you triumphed, you walked away with coin in one hand and a glaring target on your back. What did you truly gain? A fleeting week of sleeping in haylofts, bribing ferry captains, shaving your beard in the pitch black, and adopting the alias of Brother Lucian, mingling with monks heading eastward. But did success equate to survival? No, it simply meant starting anew in another city, under a new guise with even more eyes seeking you out. You made the kill now run like the wind. If the life of a medieval assassin wasn't wretched enough, poor hunted and bedding down in places reeking of goat, you also had to contend with the wild inventive paranoia of those around you. Assassins weren't just feared, they were considered cursed otherworldly beings. To the common folk, you weren't merely a cloaked figure of death. You were an unholy apparition, whispering to demons, smearing your blade with frog guts under the full moon's eerie glow. How else could you slip past, guards vanish into shadows? Logic, a superstition, that was the currency of the realm. Some whispered tales of shape-shifting assassins, while others believed you were invisible until touched by holy water. There was even a chilling story of assassins making pacts with forest spirits, breathing death through walls. Imagine strolling through a village, hearing a mother whisper to her child, "Don't look at him, he might curse the baby." Even your tools were objects of suspicion and fear. In the shadows of suspicion, you carried a dagger, an instrument not of mere steel, but of a cursed forge. It was a relic of dark enchantments, a blade whispered to be bathed in the sinister arts. And the poison you wielded, it was not the work of mere chemistry, but the essence of witchcraft itself, perhaps stirred with a severed toe beneath the eerie glow of a blood moon. One would assume this aura of dread might shield you, deterring others with mere whispers of your presence. Alas, the truth was far more harrowing. The superstitious throngs, they did not merely avoid you. They hunted you with a fervor born of fear. No questions were asked, no mercy was shown. Stones flew fires, raged, and cries echoed through the village. Burn him before he summons the storm. Your reputation, a dark cloud over the town, triggered panic at the slightest misfortune. Should someone succumb unexpectedly to illness, mishap, or even a choking hazard, the murmurs would start. Could it be the Shadow Man? Perhaps it was him. Thus you were forced into a life of constant motion, a nomad in your own land. To linger too long was to invite catastrophe. Imagine, if you will, a priest's bell tolling ominously, while 5 farmers, their faces set with grim determination, brandish pitchforks as if they had been anticipating this very moment all their lives. And woe betide you should you possess anything deemed unusual, dried herbs, odd coins, or a foreign accent. That was all the evidence needed for someone to scream, "Sorcerer!" and ignite the flames. In a world where monsters lurked behind human visages, your mere existence became a threat. Too silent, too clever, too swift, any of these traits could seal your fate. In the twisted logic of the medieval mind, such threats were to be extinguished swiftly, preferably in a blaze. Poison, the assassin's tool of choice, elegant in theory. A silent death, no gore, no cries, just a sip, a stagger, a sigh, and it was done. That was the ideal, of course. But in practice, attempting a poisoning in the Middle Ages was akin to entering a barroom brawl, armed only with herbal tea and a defiant glare. Poisons then were unpredictable, far from the refined toxins of today. You had access not to vials of cyanide or neat fast-acting doom, but to plants and mushrooms. In the shadowy world of medieval intrigue, the task of poisoning was fraught with peril and unpredictability. Imagine the scene: you, a clandestine figure with a sack of minerals, and perhaps an unlucky toad or two must concoct a lethal brew. But oh, the precision required no scales or measures here. You relied on a mere eyeball guess. A dash too scant, and the noble might merely suffer a bout of nausea, perhaps even vowing never to dine without his ever-watchful anti-assassin squad. A tad too much, and you, the poisoner, could succumb to the very toxin before the feast even begins. Moreover, the medieval kitchen was a labyrinth of chaos. Slipping in unnoticed to sprinkle some deadly nightshade into the stew was a feat in itself. You might have to bribe or impersonate a cook, or worse, attempt to contaminate a meal that would be sampled by not 1, but 3 tasters, and even a loyal hound. Yes, a dog for nobles dining was not merely a culinary affair, but a strategic operation where each morsel was scrutinized, blessed and sniffed by all, from the steward to the jester. By the time the dish reached the noble's plate, it had undergone more scrutiny than a royal bride on her wedding day. Now, let's say you manage to evade detection and your poison finds its way into the noble's meal. The aftermath: a wild ride of uncertainty. Some poisons act swiftly while others bide their time. One moment your target might be chuckling over a jest, the next he's clutching his stomach, urgently calling for his astrologer. Should they survive the blame, it wouldn't fall on the cook or the taster, but squarely on you, the mysterious figure with a penchant for herbs and a nervous tic. Poisoning, then, was not the art of efficiency, but a dance with danger, slow, fraught with variables, none of which favored the poisoner. And should you be apprehended, your end would not be swift. Instead, you'd face interrogation with instruments of pain, forced to confess to poisoning everyone, from the duke to the watchdog. The treacherous path of the medieval poisoner. If you ever dared to believe that your audacious act of altering history's cruel path by eliminating a tyrant, severing a royal bloodline, or muting a political menace would etch your name into the annals of memory, think again. As an assassin, your existence was never meant to be acknowledged. At most, you were the stuff of whispers, a shadowy figure, perhaps a foreign stranger with icy eyes, or the unassuming man who always left his ale untouched. You might have executed the most legendary assassination of the century yet. In the official chronicles, you would merely be a footnote, a mysterious demise. And that was precisely the intent. Your employer craved not tales of glory, but the shield of plausible deniability. The fewer souls privy to your identity, the safer they remained, less likely to taste their own medicine from another assassin's blade. Thus your name was interred the instant the task was complete. Did you even use your real name? No signatures, no boasts, no mementos. You were but a fleeting specter at the moment of the kill. And should someone know your name, they became a dangerous thread to be snipped swiftly. In your line of work, such threads had an exceedingly brief existence. Forget about honor. There were no accolades for silence, no grand statues for the man who single-handedly averted a war with a silent strike in the dead of night. If a noble desired a monument, they would erect one to themselves. For you, a simple wooden coffin, an unmarked grave, or if fortune frowned your head on a spike branded as a traitor. Sometimes your name was known only so it could be cursed, a whispered cautionary tale. Don't cross the king, they'd say. Remember what happened to Lord Ulrich. Yes, and the assassin who did it vanished like a wisp of smoke. That was your legacy. Not fame, not fear, just... In the shadows of medieval times, you were never meant to linger, to leave a trace of your existence. Your mission was to dissolve into the ether, to evaporate like morning mist. Yet you remained a haunting specter in the memory of those who would rather forget. Heroes were etched into the annals of history, their deeds celebrated. Assassins, however, were condemned to oblivion, their names erased with the stroke of a quill. Oh, but you defied the odds. You survived the treacherous dance of death, completed your grim task, and even pocketed the silver, a marvel truly. Now the plan was to disappear, to sink into the anonymity of the crowd, trusting that your patron would keep their end of the bargain, safeguarding your anonymity. But here's the twist, the cruel irony of the assassin's creed. Never trust anyone, least of all, the one who holds the purse strings. Your employer, whether a noble with a tarnished crest, a merchant with a lust for power, or a bishop with ambitions as murky as the river Styx, did not engage your services out of admiration. No, they sought you out because they required the unspeakable, and you, with your blade as sharp as your wit, were their chosen instrument in the darkness. With the deed done, you transformed from asset to threat. You bore the weight of their secrets, knew the who, the when, the why, and the price of blood. This knowledge made you perilous, not just to their foes, but to themselves. What then? They vanished, denying your very existence, or worse, they dispatched another to sever the connection with something more final than a contract's ink. There were whispers of clients who played a deadly game, hiring one assassin to perform the act and another to eliminate the first upon completion. No refunds, only a chilling reduction of risk. And should you, in your audacity, attempt to blackmail to threaten exposure, that was a bold move indeed, a final fatal error. For in the medieval world, the powerful did not parley with shadows. They obliterated them. If your client had a secret so dark, so damning, in a world where honor was as scarce as a fleeting dream, you might have found yourself paid and momentarily left in solitude. Yet the eyes of suspicion never truly left you. Imagine, if you will, the chilling sensation of being watched from afar as someone sharpens a blade, studying your every stride, your every breath. You were the enigma that dared not speak, the phantom that could never linger. Success, even at its zenith, could not buy you trust. For in the minds of those who knew your trade, if you had taken one life, you were a perennial threat to take another. No one, not even your own employer, wished to be your next mark. Suppose, against all odds, you weathered the storm of assassinations, deceit, poison, and treachery. You outlived your adversaries, your patrons, and perhaps even your own moral compass. What then? Retirement. Oh, what a cruel jest in the medieval epic. Assassins were not granted the luxury of a golden exit. No lavish feast to bid farewell, no serene seaside cottages, no coffers overflowing with gratitude. You did not merely fade into obscurity, you either vanished or met your demise, often both. The predicament was starkly simple, you were never truly safe. Even if you abandoned the life of a killer, your past clung to you like a relentless shadow. Your mind held too many secrets, too many names, and your hands bore the indelible stains of your former deeds. The world did not desire your retirement, it yearned for your erasure, which often translated to your burial. And even if by some miracle no one pursued you, you lived under the perpetual dread that a new assassin, eager to carve his name in infamy, might receive a contract with your description. So you reinvented yourself. You adopted a new name, moved to a village where questions were as rare as trust, feigned a limp, and peddled herbs, claiming a past as a guard. Yet even in this new guise, tranquility eluded you. Peace was but a distant memory, a dream unfulfilled. You shunned the throngs of humanity, always choosing a seat with your back to the wall, your eyes fixed on the door like a sentinel. Beneath the floorboards, hidden from sight, lay your dagger resting beside a pouch of coins that you dared not touch, for they bore the scent of the man from whom you earned them. Trust was a luxury you could ill afford. Years of silent assassinations and swift retreats had sculpted your psyche into a fortress of paranoia. Every rap on the door sent shivers down your spine. Each passerby on the dusty roads might know your face, your crimes. Dreaming became a perilous luxury. It opened doors to vulnerabilities you could not afford. Love was an emotion you locked away. Relaxation, a memory, and laughter was stifled lest it betray your presence. You lived as a specter, masquerading as a man, your existence, a mere whisper in the annals of time. Oh, the cruel irony. There was no grand finale for one such as you, no dramatic curtain call. Just a gradual, chilling descent into the shadows of oblivion. Constantly on the move, ever vigilant, until one day you would simply vanish into the night, unnoticed, unremarked upon. Perhaps that was the best fate you could hope for. By now the harsh truth must have dawned upon you. The life of a medieval assassin was neither darkly romantic nor noble. It was scarcely even lucrative. It was a bleak, ungrateful existence, swaddled in blood-soaked linen, with a retinue of enemies, eager for your demise. You wouldn't last long, not even a week perhaps, not even a day. You would begin with misconceptions, believing yourself to be the master of shadows, a silent, deadly whisper. But reality would paint you as cold, famished, and one misstep from the gallows. You'd arrive in town under the cloak of night, ready for the kill, only to find your quarry had vanished. The guards, though inebriated, were dangerously alert, and the stable boy you bribed for information, he betrayed you for a mug of ale and a crust of bread. You'd freeze at the critical moment, strike the wrong man, or be recognized by a maid who once glimpsed your face in a different town. Imagine yourself not as a mere shadow, but suddenly the epicenter of chaos within the ancient chapel walls. What then? You flee your heart, pounding your breath, ragged. But the medieval landscape is not your ally. The treacherous mud, the uneven moss-covered cobblestones, and the absurdly numerous chickens darting across your path. You slip your feet, betraying you, and down you go, only to be apprehended by a guard named Thomas, freshly jilted and eager for a distraction. Assume you somehow escape his grasp. What next? The aftermath is a desolate landscape of your own making. No allies to speak of, no honor left intact, and your future. A bleak canvas painted with whispers and suspicion. The grim realization dawns that even success in this shadowy game offers nothing more than a solitary, secretive existence in some forgotten village where belief in fairies still lingers. Why would you persist? The assassin's life, far from glamorous, is a merciless grinder, devouring souls and expelling only shadows. It promises power, but delivers no peace, offers purpose, yet leaves you with no place in the world. You don't etch your name into history, you erase it. And what awaits at the end of this perilous journey, silence, a silence so profound that no one even remembers your existence, a silence unchallenged and unquestioned. But before she was the feared Queen of Macedonia, Olympus was known as Myrtale, a Maloyan princess from the rugged, untamed lands of Epirus. Her lineage boasted descent from Achilles, the legendary hero. Whether or not the blood of heroes indeed flowed through her veins, one truth was undeniable. This was no woman destined for the sidelines of history. From her earliest days, Myrtale was immersed in the arcane and the sacred. Her upbringing was not just a matter of politics, but was deeply entwined with prophecy, ecstatic rites, and a profound reverence for the ancient deities. She was not the kind of princess who would spend her days in idle embroidery or demure smiles. No, her spirit yearned for something far more profound and potent. In the shadow of serpents, under the gaze of the moon, Olympias danced in the frenzied rituals of Dionysus. These ceremonies, filled with wild abandon, were more than mere acts of worship. They were a testament to her profound personal communion with the divine. Ancient texts penned by men both captivated and cowed whisper tales of her, keeping sacred snakes as intimate companions, allowing them to entwine with her in the solitude of her bedchamber. Whether truth or the venomous sting of slander that often plagues women of power, this image clung to her like a second skin. To her supporters, it was a sign of her divinity. To her detractors, it marked her as a peril. Her influence was not born in the clamor of battlefields or the cold echo of throne rooms, but in the soft, uncertain glow of torchlight amidst the hushed reverence of priestesses and the sinuous forms of serpents. Olympias was no mere princess. She was an oracle alive, a conduit of ancient untamed forces far beyond the grasp of mere politics or the sharpness of steel. When Philip II of Macedon, with his brutal intellect and insatiable desires, came to the sacred island of Samothrace for initiation, he did not simply encounter a princess of beauty. He stumbled upon a mystery, an enigma wrapped in moonlight and prophecy. Their union was not merely a strategic marriage, but a tempestuous clash of destiny and dominion. From the outset, it was a marriage steeped in portents. Some say the heavens themselves roared with lightning on their wedding night. Others recount Olympias dreaming of a thunderbolt piercing her womb. All these whispers would weave into legend. One undeniable truth emerged from this union: Olympias and Philip did not just produce an heir, they unleashed Alexander the Great upon the world. From the moment of his conception, Olympias was determined to mold his fate, to carve his path through the annals of history with the same fervor she danced under the stars. Imagine the birth of an empire, a tale woven from threads of prophecy, pride, and paranoia. In the heart of this unfolding drama stood Philip, a man as ruthless as he was charismatic, gathering wives like trophies. Around 357 BCE, he took Olympias as his bride. She was young, yes, but far from naive. In Philip, she saw not just a man of ambition, but perhaps a divine counterpart to her own spiritual journey. Macedon was no gentle land for a newcomer. It was a place where iron forged both weapons and wills, where kings could be slain by kin, and brothers turned rivals in the blink of an eye. Yet Olympias, the priestess of Papyrus, entered with her head high and her gaze fixed on the crown. Their union from the very beginning was like flint and steel, sparking at every turn. Philip, for all his cunning in politics, was not a man for monogamy. He married for power, for alliances, often leaving Olympias in the shadows of his ambitions. But Olympias was not one to be overshadowed. She held her own court, wove her own alliances, and often turned to oracles and rites to glimpse her future and perhaps to divine Philip's fate. Then came the birth of Alexander, a moment cloaked in celestial intrigue. Legends whisper that Olympias dreamt of a thunderbolt striking her womb, flames dancing around her child without harm. Philip in turn claimed to have seen a vision of sealing his wife's womb with a lion, a literal lion. Whether these visions were believed or crafted, they painted Alexander as one destined not merely to rule a kingdom, but the world itself. Yet as the child was celebrated, the cracks in the royal marriage only widened. Olympias harbored deep resentments towards Philip's other wives, particularly Cleopatra Eurydice, his Macedonian-born bride from later in his life. This was more than a domestic squabble. It was a threat to her own standing, a challenge to her son's destiny. Could the empire withstand such internal strife? The burden Olympias bore was not just for her own honor, but to ensure that the child she carried would be seen as pure in the eyes of the local nobility, a direct threat to Alexander's future. Olympias saw this challenge with piercing clarity. The palace was no mere abode. It was a relentless battlefield. Here she would deploy every weapon at her disposal, every snake dream ritual and whisper to guarantee that her son was not merely remembered, but crowned. She transcended her former self, Myrtle, to become Olympus, fierce and formidable, and no one would dare usurp her son's throne without facing her fury. By the time Alexander had reached his teenage years, the Macedonian palace in Pella had transformed into a theater of war where veiled insults flew like arrows. Political maneuvering was the dance of the day, and bitter rivalries simmered under every smile. Olympias wasn't just vying for influence, she was battling for survival. She knew the court was a nest of vipers, but she was the master who taught them their venomous ways. Philip II had begun to drift away from her, his heart and mind ensnared more by campaigns, the bottle, and perhaps most grievously, the counsel of his Macedonian advisors. The final crushing blow was his marriage to a young noblewoman, Cleopatra Eurydice, not the Cleopatra of Egypt, but a Macedonian whose uncle Attalus was one of Philip's chief generals. To Olympias, this was not merely betrayal, it was a declaration of war. The wedding feast turned into a scene of chaos. Attalus, in his drunken stupor, openly mocked Olympias and Alexander, casting doubt on the legitimacy of Alexander's birth. Was he truly Philip's son, or was he the offspring of a god, as Olympias boldly claimed the insult was meant to sting? But Olympias embraced the myth. Let them whisper, let them believe her son was touched by Zeus himself. It made him untouchable. In a storm of emotion, Alexander left the feast and Olympias fled Macedon, retreating to Epirus. But this was no defeat, it was strategy. In her homeland, she plotted her next move with the patience of a spider weaving its web. Yet she remained the epitome of royalty, a queen not diminished but emboldened by distance. Her influence, though subtle, was a venomous whisper that could undermine Philip's palace from its very foundations. She need not stand in the flesh to pose a threat. Her mind was weapon enough. Then the earth trembled with a shock that would echo through time. A king was felled at his own daughter's wedding feast, moments before he would have launched his grand invasion of Persia, on the cusp of claiming not just the crown of Macedon, but the title of emperor of all known lands. Who could have done such a deed? Was it Porcinius, the scorned bodyguard, acting out his vengeance? Or was it the result of the tangled web of courtly deceit? Could young Alexander, or dare we whisper Olympias herself, have orchestrated this? No evidence surfaced, no one dared to speak the truth, but the murmurs of suspicion were rife. Within days, Cleopatra Eurydice and her infant were discovered dead. Whispers like icy winds suggested Olympia's hand in their demise. The serpent had slithered back into the palace, and now no obstacle remained between her son and the throne. With Philip's life extinguished and Macedon shrouded in a fog of mourning or bewilderment, Olympia struck with the precision of a seasoned predator. Cleopatra Eurydice, the young Macedonian queen, her rival, was the first to fall. The tales of her demise are chilling, a spectacle of cruelty meant to send a message. Some whisper she was coerced into taking her own life after witnessing her child's brutal end. Others claim Olympias ordered the infant tossed onto a funeral pyre. What was undeniable was the mercilessness of the act. Olympias knew what many mothers in ancient courts failed to grasp in the royal game. Mercy is a luxury, a rival child, even an infant, a seed of future rebellion. And Olympias was no longer playing defense. With Cleopatra's lineage obliterated, her path was clear. Olympias, the regal architect of her son's ascendancy, turned her gaze towards securing Alexander's throne with a mother's fierce determination. Her teenage progeny, bold and brilliant, already tutored by the great Aristotle, was proclaimed king with little to no opposition. Yet let us not be deceived by mere appearances. It was not solely his charisma or the legacy of his father Philip II that paved this path. No, it was Olympias herself orchestrating this grand chess game of power. She knew precisely which generals to intimidate, which nobles to charm, and which adversaries to discreetly eliminate. She wasn't merely safeguarding her son's rise, she was meticulously crafting it. Alexander, for all his glory, did not always condone his mother's methods. He voiced his disapproval of the harsh measures taken against Cleopatra's kin. Yet he did not halt her actions, recognizing perhaps the harsh truth that Olympias had long understood power necessitates sacrifice. In Macedon, bloodlines were both a boon and a bane. With her son now enthroned, Olympia subtly withdrew from the forefront of public life. This was not a retreat, but a strategic pivot. From open maneuvers to whispered influence, she transitioned with grace. As Alexander readied for his conquest of Persia, she did not linger as a mere spectator, but as the spiritual sentinel of his fate. She dispatched sacred relics, sought the wisdom of oracles, and conducted rites in his name. To Olympias, her son's mission was not merely military, it was divine. Alexander was not merely going to war, he was fulfilling a prophecy. And as long as breath filled her lungs, no rival Macedonian, Persian, or other would thwart this celestial plan. She had placed the crown upon her son's head, purged the palace of threats, and now she stood guard over his empire. From behind the curtain, with her teeth bared, Olympias wielded her power. As Alexander marched eastward to conquer the known world, Olympias remained in Macedon, a queen without a visible throne, yet not without dominion. Her official title was Queen Mother, but let us be clear, she ruled in all but name. Though the regency was officially handed to Antipater, one of Alexander's most trusted generals, Olympias would not be relegated to the shadows. She penned letters. Amidst the sprawling expanse of his burgeoning empire, Alexander's heart was a battleground of its own, besieged by the relentless missives from his mother Olympias. These were not the gentle, loving words one might expect from a mother to her son. Rather, they were sharp political dispatches infused with prophetic warnings and a mother's biting concern. Alexander, leagues away, devoured each word with a mix of duty and dread. Olympias reminded him with a fervor only a mother could muster of who his true adversaries were. She interrogated the fidelity of his closest allies, questioned his dalliance with Persian culture, his choice of consorts, and his audacious flirtation with divinity. None but Olympias dared to challenge him so. Her voice, both maternal and divinely ordained, was never silenced by fear. Meanwhile, back in Macedon, Antipater's patience frayed like a thread under tension. Olympias, with her royal lineage and her sacred mantle, was a formidable adversary. She wielded her influence like a weapon, stoking dissent among the nobles of Epirus, Thessaly, and beyond. With whispers more lethal than any blade, she could ignite the fires of rebellion with but a breath. Her correspondences to Alexander grew more desperate, painting Antipater as a second Philip poised to betray and seize power. Whether her fears were genuine or a mere ploy to retain her influence, she urged her son to act decisively. Yet Alexander, caught between his mother's demands and the necessity of Antipater's governance in Greece, remained in a quandary. The chasm between mother and general deepened, and Olympias, ever watchful, grew increasingly restless. She had not survived the treacherous courts of Macedon to be overshadowed by an aging soldier. As Alexander's dominion stretched from the Aegean to the Indus, Olympias saw the cracks in his empire's foundation. He was spreading himself too thin, relying too heavily on foreign counsel, drifting away from the divine guidance and the maternal wisdom that had shaped him. She believed his triumphs were the fruits of divine intervention in her own counsel. If he forgot this, if he strayed too far, what then? The news of Alexander's demise in Babylon in 323 BCE didn't trumpet its arrival. It stabbed Macedon like a dagger, piercing the heart of Olympias herself. For her, it wasn't merely the loss of a son. No, it was the crumbling of an empire, a world she had meticulously constructed over the years. Her boy, the divine storm she had prophesied, nurtured, and unleashed upon the world, was gone. And what he left behind was not the clear skies of peace, but a tempest of chaos. The mighty empire he had carved with his sword was already beginning to splinter. Generals, these so-called successors, were like jackals circling ready to feast on the remains of what Alexander had built. Antipater, with his iron grip on Macedon and Greece, harbored no affection for Olympias. And to add to the turmoil, her daughter Cleopatra, Alexander's sister, was being wooed by rival generals, each one eager to leverage her royal blood for their own claim to the throne. Olympias could see the storm brewing on the horizon. Civil war was not just a looming threat, it was an inevitability. Gone was Alexander, her guiding star, but what remained was his bloodline. His son Alexander IV, born to Roxana, the Bactrian princess Alexander had taken as his wife, was now in Macedon, vulnerable, a mere infant. Olympias knew this child was the last true piece of her son's legacy, a beacon of hope, but also a target. Yet this made him not just a liability, but a potent weapon in the political battlefield. She threw her lot in with Roxana and the boy, vowing to shield them, to wield the child's birthright as her own banner. But the winds were shifting. The generals who once bowed to Alexander now had their own ambitions, their own armies, and their own grudges. They were not about to kneel to his widow or his mother. The stage was set for a fierce struggle, a fight for the soul of an empire that Olympias could not abandon. Olympus did not waver. She had confronted serpents, betrayers, and monarchs alike. What were a few warlords adorned with crowns and wielding pilfered spears to her? She bided her time, her gaze unyielding, as she watched Antipater breathe his last, his son Cassander, stepping into the void, a man whose veins ran with the chill of winter, his patience for the old queen's machinations long since frozen over. The inevitable clash of these titans loomed on the horizon, the serpentine matriarch of Alexander poised against the cold-eyed usurper, intent on bearing her legacy. Alexander was no more, yet his shadow still danced, and within it Olympus lay coiled, ready to unleash her venom. Years following Alexander's demise, as his once mighty empire disintegrated into the chaos of civil strife, Olympias executed her boldest gambit. She did not return to Macedon cloaked in mourning. She came as a tempest of divine wrath, a political juggernaut. The regency had fragmented with Cassander, the son of her ancient foe Antipater, grasping at power while Roxana and young Alexander IV were confined, their fates hanging by a thread. Olympias, reading the omens, knew the hour was at hand. If she did not act, her grandson's existence would fade like the last light of dusk. In a pact with Polyperchon, an aging general who still bore a shred of rightful authority, Olympias returned not to beg, but to govern. With Polyperchon's support, she marched into Macedon, leading an army. And as her feet kissed the sacred soil of home, the land itself seemed to awaken. Gates of towns swung open as soldiers flocked to her banner, and even some of her former adversaries paused, their hearts stirred by the name that still made the earth tremble. Then her retribution began. One by one, she hunted down Cassander's loyalists. When she finally cornered Philip III, Aridaeus Alexander's mentally challenged half-brother and puppet king, she commanded his death. Some tales whisper that his wife Eurydice was also captured, her fate sealed by the hands of Olympias. The air was thick with the echoes of vengeance as Olympias, in her twilight years, proved that the spirit of Alexander's mother was not to be underestimated. Could anyone truly eclipse the legacy of such a formidable woman? The answer, like the shadow of Alexander, lingered unresolved. Given the chance to end her own life, she recoiled, refusing to bend to Olympus's twisted will. Instead, Olympus, with a flair for the dramatic, had her strangled, an act of savagery cloaked in the guise of royal decree. The scene was staged as if a divine hand had dealt justice. But the message was unmistakable. Only the lineage of Alexander was fit to rule. All others were mere pretenders to the throne. For a fleeting, fiery moment, Olympias clutched the kingdom in her fierce grasp. She had breathed life back into the dynasty, exacted retribution for betrayals, and shown Macedon the sheer force of royal power, wielded by a woman with nothing left to lose. But power in Macedon was as volatile as wildfire in parched grass. And Cassander, ever the strategist, waited in the shadows, his patience a weapon as sharp as his sword. He returned with a vengeance, his forces outnumbering hers, his coffers overflowing, his heart as cold as ice. Her allies began to desert her one by one. Polyperon's influence waned, and the tide of fortune shifted against her. Olympus, now solitary within the fortress of Pydna, watched as her enemies encircled her stronghold. She had ignited the flame, and now as Macedon burned, the smoke was thick, and Cassander's forces were at the gates. Olympias, once the epitome of terror in the ancient world, now faced a siege alone and cut off within the coastal fortress of Pydna. Encircled by Cassander's army, come to complete the mission his father had begun, she stood unyielding. No pleas escaped her lips, no cries for mercy. For nearly a year, she endured the siege, her spirit as unyielding as a statue forged from divine fury. Provisions dwindled, sickness infiltrated the walls, allies disappeared like morning mist. Yet within those stone confines, she remained an indomitable force, a reminder of the power she once wielded. To the very end, Olympias carried herself not as a captive, but as the mother of a god. Cassander, ever cautious, hesitated. He understood the peril in killing Olympias. Even now, she was shrouded in myth-like armor, still the indomitable queen, even in her darkest hour. The notion of striking down Olympias, the formidable mother of Alexander the Great, seemed almost sacrilegious. Thus he extended an offer of sanctuary. Surrender, he implored, promising her life would be preserved. Yet Olympias, wise beyond the years of her son's conquest, knew well the fleeting nature of such royal oaths. Starvation, however, was not merely an inconvenience. It was a specter of death. Her stronghold crumbled, her loyalists capitulated, and Olympias, resolute to the last, was ultimately delivered into the hands of her adversaries. Cassandra, in a twist of cruel irony, did not end her life directly. That would have been far too lenient. Instead, he relinquished her to the kin of those she had condemned during her fleeting grasp on power. Let them, he decreed, determine her destiny. They sentenced her to death, yet here lies the irony. When the executioners approached, not a single soul dared to deliver the first strike. Olympia stood regal and silent, her gaze piercing through them like an oracle through the mists of time. These were Macedonians raised on tales of her mystical rites, her prophetic visions, her serpentine companions. They had once exalted her son as a deity incarnate, and now before them stood a fragile old woman draped in legend. Not one man could muster the courage to wield the blade. Thus Cassandra summoned others foreigners devoid of any recollection of her former might, armed only with directives to obey. And so Olympias was felled not with pomp, not with honor, but in silence. Her demise extinguished the last spark of an empire built on divine aspiration. Yet even in death, Olympias cast a long shadow. History would not forget the serpent queen who met her end, not on a throne, but in the dust, defenseless, forsaken, and executed by those she once commanded. But history in its enigmatic fashion does not, herself. Oh, how the whispers of history echo with her name. Olympias, the mother who was more than just a mother. She wielded her maternal role like a sword sharp and relentless, and her foresight, her prophecies were her shield against the tides of time. She wasn't merely the bearer of Alexander the Great, she was the very architect of his ascent. Without her, the myth of the divine child would have remained a mere whisper, lost to the winds of oblivion. No rituals of thunderbolts, no lion roars in the hallowed halls of power, and no ruthless purges that carved a path for a teenage king to ascend and dominate the known world. Olympus did not merely give birth to an empire. She fiercely defended it with claws, with a ferocity that set her apart even among the most ruthless of ancient dynasts. She did not lead armies across battlefields like Cleopatra, nor did she charge into the fray like Boudica. No, her battlefield was far more insidious, a chilling arena of poisoned chalices, strategic marriages, priestesses, and oracles. Olympias knew the power of fear. Yes, but even more profound was her mastery over belief. She convinced the world that her son was divine, perhaps even convincing herself in the process. Her enemies painted her as a murderer, a witch, a manipulator, and they were not incorrect. Olympias was indeed all these things forged in a brutal world where cunning was prized far above kindness. She learned the harsh lesson that mercy was a luxury queens could ill afford. In the centuries that followed, her name was both cursed and celebrated. Some saw her as a villain, others as a visionary. But no historian, from the dusty scrolls of antiquity to the modern scholars, could dismiss her as irrelevant. She lingered in Alexander's legacy, like a spectral presence always lurking just behind the scenes, always orchestrating from the shadows. Perhaps that was her true place, not as a tragic figure or a mere footnote in a king's tale, but as a saga in her own right, a testament to the power of influence and the enduring echo of a woman who shaped history with her indomitable will. Ah, the enigma of Olympia, the woman entwined with prophecy who slumbered with serpents and outlasted even the gods themselves. Her bones have long since turned to dust, but her legend, oh, it lives on, pulsating through every tale of ruthless queens and in the murmurs of destiny carved by blood. In every empire erected on the foundations of myth, she lingers coiled in the shadows ever waiting. Imagine, if you will, an island kissed by the sun, just a whisper south of the bustling, modern city of Heracleon. Here lies a ruin, a place so dreamlike, it blurs the lines between reality and fantasy. This is Knossos, the very heart of Minoan civilization, the birthplace of one of humanity's most enduring legends, the Labyrinth of the Minotaur. Before the legend, however, there was a palace. Not just any palace, but a marvel, a city beneath one roof, constructed around 1900 BCE and expanded through the centuries. Encompassing nearly 150,000 square feet, it boasted over 1,000 rooms each, with its own purpose, from light wells to storage magazines, from sacred shrines to bustling workshops. Imagine, if you dare, the first flushing toilets in history, the luxury of running water, multi-story apartments, and an intricate system for air circulation. This was not some primitive stronghold. This was an architectural masterpiece, a testament to human ingenuity. To the modern archaeologist, Knossos might seem like organized chaos, but to the ancients who walked its halls, it must have felt like pure magic. Enter Sir Arthur Evans, the British archaeologist, whose spade in the early 1900s unearthed this wonder. Convinced that this was the origin of the Greek labyrinth myth, he found himself amidst a maze of disorienting corridors, deeply symbolic architecture, and everywhere the haunting presence of bulls painted on walls carved into stone. What secrets did this place hold? What tales did it whisper to those who dared to listen? Indeed, the bull was not just an animal to the Minoans. It was a sacred emblem woven into the very fabric of their culture. Sir Arthur Evans, captivated by this reverence, went as far as to christen the civilization after the mythic king Minos. Whether Minos was flesh and blood or merely a whisper of legend, his tale has become inextricably linked to the enigmatic ruins of Knossos. Yet here lies the enigma: no one has unearthed a literal labyrinth beneath these ancient stones. No subterranean mazes, no hidden chambers, no monstrous creatures lurking in the shadows. What we find instead is a city that itself seems to defy comprehension, a labyrinthine network of loop swings and layers as if designed to confound and perplex. As you delve deeper into this architectural puzzle, the boundaries between what was real and what was myth begin to dissolve into a mist of intrigue and wonder. So one must ponder, was the Minotaur truly born within these walls? Or could the palace itself embody the beast Knossos, might guard its secrets jealously, yet it masterfully compels us to question our understanding of history and myth. The legend of the Minotaur, as famous as the ruins themselves, tells of a monstrous half-man, half-bull ensnared in a labyrinth so intricate that escape was an impossibility for all but the Athenian hero Theseus. With the aid of a simple ball of thread and the clever guidance of Princess Ariadne, he managed to slay the beast and find his way back to the light. But from whence did this tale spring? Why a labyrinth? The earliest whispers of this myth speak of King Minos, the formidable ruler of Crete who exacted tribute from Athens, 7 boys and 7 girls each year, destined to be devoured by the Minotaur. This creature, a symbol of divine retribution and hidden shame, was imprisoned in an underground maze representing the sinister undercurrents of power, a savage secret cloaked in splendor. To the ancient Greeks, Crete was a land of opulence, mystery, and dread. Its seafaring inhabitants, the Minoans, were seen as both sophisticated and otherworldly. Their rituals, like bull leaping, and their art spoke of a civilization both advanced and enigmatic. As you wander through the ancient halls of Knossos, a sense of otherworldliness envelops you. To an ancient Greek from 1000 BCE, this place might have seemed like a portal to another realm. Here, the bull, revered and sacred, danced through Minoan culture, its majestic form immortalized in frescoes, where daring young men and women leaped over charging beasts in rituals that pulse with the lifeblood of legend. The rooftops and altars, crowned with stylized bullhorns known as horns of consecration, whisper of a deeper spiritual connection to these powerful creatures. Imagine the palace itself a labyrinthine enigma, its twisting corridors and hidden chambers, the perfect crucible for myth-making. But what if the Minotaur was not merely a beast of fable? What if it symbolized something more profound? Scholars ponder if this tale mirrors the historical subjugation of Athens by the mighty Cretans, a time when tributes were paid to a more formidable, enigmatic power. The labyrinth then might represent the political entrapment of lesser states ensnared in the complex web of Minoan dominance. Yet there's a psychological dimension too. Could the labyrinth be the mind's own maze where the Minotaur lurks as our primal hidden urges, and Theseus, the hero, ventures into the darkness, guided only by the delicate thread of memory? The myth of Knossos, intertwined with the very essence of the palace, offers no physical monster or Ariadne to guide us, but perhaps something far more compelling. It's not just a myth reverberating through time, but a history yearning to be mythologized. Long before Athens erected its marble temples or Sparta honed its warriors, the Minoans thrived not through brute conquest, but through the artistry of trade, the magic of art, and an almost divine mastery over architecture. At the core of their civilization stood Knossos, not merely a royal residence, but a vibrant nexus of culture, ritual, and economic prowess. The Minoans, flourishing from around 2600 to 1400 BCE, crafted a world where the lines between myth and history blurred, where their legacy was not just told, but felt in the very stones of their magnificent palaces. Imagine the Minoans, a civilization whose trade routes stretched like the roots of an ancient tree reaching far and wide, from the sands of Egypt to the fertile crescents of Mesopotamia, from the bustling Levant to the sun-kissed shores of distant Spain. Their ships, like silent arrows, sliced through the Mediterranean, their holds brimming with pottery, saffron, bronze, and the finest of luxuries. Yet they did not amass armies. Instead, they wove a web of relationships, understanding that alliances, not arsenals, were the true path to wealth. What captivates us most about Minoan culture is its stark contrast to the Greek successors that followed. Their art did not glorify war or divine retribution, but rather celebrated the essence of life itself, nature, animals, and the fluidity of human movement. Frescoes depict dancers, dolphins, and athletes leaping over bulls with grace and agility. Even their goddesses stand apart, powerful, bare-breasted figures, often clutching snake symbols, not of fear, but of fertility, transformation, or protection. At the heart of this vibrant civilization lay Knossos, not perched like a fortress on a hill, but nestled in a lush valley. There were no towering walls of defense, suggesting either a profound sense of security or an aura of such influence that defense was rendered unnecessary. Their architectural confidence was palpable: multi-story buildings, colonnaded courtyards, and plumbing systems that whisper tales of a society far ahead of its time. Yet for all their sophistication, the Minoans left us with no deciphered writings. Their script linear. A remains a puzzle, a silent testament to their existence. We are left in the dark about their self-identity, their royal beliefs, the prayers they uttered, or the secrets whispered within the walls of Knossos. What we have are their ruins, their art, their influence, which were later absorbed by the Mycenaeans and echoed in Greek myths. The Minoans were not mere builders of palaces, they were architects of mystery. Knossos wasn't just a structure, it was the pulsating heart of a civilization that gleamed like sunlight on the Aegean, only to vanish as mysteriously as it appeared. But some whisper that their echo still roams the labyrinthine corridors of time. To wander through Knossos is to wander through the very essence of time itself. 10834. Here time layers upon itself a complex tapestry of moments that bewilder and enchant. The sheer magnitude of this place is not what seizes your senses. Rather, it is the intricate dance of its design. Rooms open into other rooms, corridors branch and disappear into the unknown, and light wells slice through the building's core. Stairs twist into darkness or unexpectedly reveal themselves in sun-drenched courtyards. And imagine the ancient whispers of labyrinth as they echoed through these halls. Knossos was not merely a palace. It was a pulsating entity sprawling over an estimated 150,000 square feet, harboring over 1,000 chambers each with its own story to tell. These chambers were no haphazard assembly, but a deliberate mosaic of life's necessities and luxuries. Workshops, storage areas, sanctuaries, living quarters, and throne rooms were all meticulously arranged around a grand central courtyard, possibly the stage for public gatherings or the enigmatic bull-leaping rituals. 0932. The palace's architecture was a symphony of levels rising up to 4 or 5 stories, in some parts utilizing the natural contours of the land and man-made terraces. Navigating this maze without succumbing to its disorienting charm would require either a keen memory, sharp instincts, or perhaps a thread like Theseus's. Yet within this apparent disorder lies a profound intelligence. The Minoans, with their mastery of passive ventilation, cooled rooms through cleverly designed air shafts and open stairwells. They engineered systems to channel rainwater through clay pipes and even boasted of flushing toilets centuries before Rome thought it chic. One of the most emblematic spaces is the so-called throne room, where an alabaster chair embedded in the wall and flanked by benches commands the space. Surrounding it, frescoes of griffins stand guard those mythical beasts that protect sacred spaces. Was this the throne of a priest-king, a chamber for a goddess, or a divine court? 1023. The truth remains veiled in mystery. The walls themselves narrate tales in vibrant hues. Dolphins dance above bathtubs and frescoes, women in flowing skirts with bared chests, and youths in midair defying gravity as they leap over bulls. This art was not mere adornment. It was the very essence of their identity, fluid, natural, deeply rooted in the earth and sea. As the depths of the sea reveal their secrets, the labyrinthine corridors of Knossos whisper their own tales of intrigue and enchantment. The deeper one ventures, the more the palace begins to disorient, as if each step takes you further from reality into a realm of myth and mystery. 1051, some of its parts with their intricate designs seem deliberately crafted to bewilder, perhaps laying the foundation for the legend of the labyrinth. Not merely a containment for monsters, but a living, breathing entity, a palace that stirs both awe and a whisper of fear. No chains, no mythical beasts, only a structure designed to make one ponder the very essence of existence and what lies beyond the next turn. Knossos was not merely an administrative hub or a royal abode. It was a sanctuary and architectural ode to the Minoan spirit drenched in ritual myth and the divine unknown. 111. 18. Unlike the grandeur of later Greek temples, with their towering columns to Zeus or marble sanctuaries to Athena, the spiritual essence of Knossos is woven subtly into its very stones. Shrines nestle in secluded corners, almost as if whispering secrets. 111:46 pillars rising, like ancient guardians cast their solemn watch over the paths. The bulla-dominant motif graces rooftops and altars with stylized horns, symbolizing a profound bond between worship nature and this revered creature. The Minoans did not fear the bull, they venerated it. The iconic bull-leaping fresco in Knossos isn't just a display of athletic prowess. 112:13. It might depict a sacred rite where young men and women perform a dance of peril and beauty, not for sport, but as a divine spectacle, perhaps an offering to the gods, or a symbolic victory over the chaotic forces of nature. And then there are the snake goddesses unearthed from the storerooms beneath the palace. These figures, with their bare chests and arms aloft serpents twined around them, exude an aura of raw power. 112:41. They are not mere idols, but potent guardians of the mysteries, embodying a strength that commands reverence. Imagine the reverence, the awe, the sheer wonder that must have filled the air as these figures were revered, each one a testament to the vibrant, pulsating life of Knossos, a palace that was not just a place, but a living, breathing entity of its time. Oh, the sacred whispers of the household fertility. The very essence of life itself found its embodiment in the snakes of the Minoans. These enigmatic creatures, entwined with the mysteries of both earth and underworld, symbolized renewal and rebirth. Imagine the rooms where these sacred objects lay hidden like precious gems in the bustling heart of the palace, each a quiet shrine or a ritual space whispering tales of the divine. Combined with the frescoes, the horns, the altars, and the maze-like corridors, the entire palace complex feels like a living, breathing ritual machine. Not merely a place for the mundane, but a grand structure engineered for communion with the gods. Here, the layout, the art, every intricate detail was part of a spiritual tapestry where the lines between the sacred and the secular blurred into nothingness. This was a world where myth shaped the very architecture, where each corridor might lead to divine encounters, and where the echoes in the stone chambers could have been the soft murmurs of ancient prayers. Knossos was not merely a residence for mortals, it was a sanctuary for the gods themselves. For centuries, it stood as a testament to prosperity, innovation, and a rich cultural tapestry. Yet in a heartbeat, something cataclysmic occurred, an event so sudden and inexplicable that by around 1400 BCE, the palace lay deserted, its frescoes fading into oblivion, and the once mighty Minoan civilization dissolved like morning mist over the Aegean. What could have caused such a downfall? Theories swirl like the dust of history. Some scholars point to nature's fury. Around 1600 BCE, the volcanic island of Thera, now known as Santorini, unleashed one of the mightiest eruptions ever recorded. The cataclysmic blast likely sent tsunamis crashing against Knossos' northern shores, ravaging ports and fields. The sky, choked with ash, might have dimmed the sun, starving crops and unsettling the climate. While Knossos itself wasn't immediately obliterated, the repercussions of this disaster might have undermined its foundations in every conceivable way. Others speculate on the specter of war. By 1450 BCE, could the seeds of conflict have been sown, leading to the mysterious vanishing of this once thriving civilization? As the mainland Greeks known as the Mycenaeans rose in power, they perhaps exploited the vulnerabilities of the weakened Minoans. Archaeological evidence hints at a brief reoccupation of Knossos, yet it was clear the culture had shifted profoundly. Quarku 1, 15, E17. The once serene art of bull leaping and snake goddesses transformed into a more militaristic expression. Linear A, the script of the Minoans, was supplanted by Linear B, the script of Mycenaean scribes. The palace, once bustling with the echoes of its ancient rites, now murmured in a foreign dialect. Some scholars propose that the Mycenaeans did not conquer through a single decisive battle, but rather absorbed the island through a gradual process, first through commerce, then through cultural influence, and eventually through governance. However, others contend that internal factors such as civil unrest, political turmoil, or the downfall of the ruling class might have played equally significant roles. What captivates historians is the absence of violence in the archaeological record. There are no charred remains, no evidence of widespread massacre. Purchipashur 16 or 4, Knossos didn't fall in a blaze of glory. It faded with a whisper. The majestic palatial system ceased to function, its halls fell silent, and its sacred rituals came to an end. Nature, ever persistent, began to reclaim the land. By the time Homer's epics echoed through the ages, Knossos was but a distant legend, its history entwined with tales of kings, mythical creatures, and labyrinthine mysteries. What ultimately led to the demise of Knossos wasn't merely volcanic eruptions or invasions. Horn 1634. It was the inexorable march of time under which even the most magnificent civilizations eventually crumble, buried beneath the ambitions of new empires. Yet the skeletal remains of this once vibrant civilization endure. If you listen intently, the labyrinth beneath still whispers its secrets. For millennia, Knossos lay hidden under Crete's soil, just another forgotten heap of stones. Its name lost its myths, garbled its walls, overtaken by olive groves and the dust of ages. 1R16, 58. But then one man, driven by a passion for legend, set out to uncover its truths. His name was Sir Arthur Evans, and he did not merely rediscover Knossos, he breathed new life into its ancient bones. Sir Arthur Evans, the British archaeologist, was not just a seeker of relics, but a man with an insatiable thirst for the dramatic and a profound reverence for Homeric legends. He acquired the very ground that whispered secrets of ancient ruins, driven by tales of local farmers unearthing peculiar seals and artifacts, clues to a colossal mystery buried beneath their humble fields. With fervor, Evans set his spade into the earth, and what emerged from the soil was nothing short of revolutionary, rewriting the annals of Aegean history. Imagine his awe and astonishment as he unveiled a palace of such grandeur, complexity, and advancement that he was utterly convinced it could be none other than the legendary abode of King Minos himself. The frescoes, the ceremonial horns, the architectural enigma of the site. It all whispered tales of the mythical labyrinth. Evans was more than an archaeologist. He was a weaver of tales, a controversial figure who dared to name the civilization that built Knossos, the Minoans, after Minos. He interpreted ancient symbols, pieced together frescoes, and in a bold move, restored sections of the palace with reinforced concrete. This audacious act has since stirred a tempest of debate, lauded as visionary by some, decried as vandalism by others. What stands at Knossos today is a fusion of ancient ruin and Edwardian imagination, a testament to Evans' daring vision. Yet beyond the controversy, Evans achieved the unthinkable. He breathed life back into Knossos, offering Europe a tantalizing glimpse into a Bronze Age world that predated classical Greece, a realm of art mystery and maritime sophistication. His excavations also unearthed Linear A, the script still shrouded in mystery, challenging our understanding of language literacy and the depths of historical knowledge. But Evans did not merely unearth stones. He resurrected a myth. He compelled historians to confront the reality that behind the legend of the labyrinth lay something tangible, intricate, and profoundly human. A palace that felt like a maze, a civilization that vanished into obscurity, and a man who, with each layer of earth he peeled back, discovered a narrative far stranger and more beautiful than any myth could ever tell. In an era far removed from our own nose, slumbered for 3 millennia, its awakening spurred by the resonant peal of a bell rung by Evans. To walk through Knossos is to traverse more than mere architecture. It is to journey through a tapestry woven with symbols and meanings. Frescoes, carvings, and intricate patterns adorn every surface, whispering secrets that the Minoans left unencoded in any Rosetta Stone. Their primary script, Linear A, still defies our understanding. Thus, instead of reading their thoughts, we are left to interpret their expressions painted on plaster, etched into stone, and concealed within the very fabric of their art. What were they endeavoring to communicate? The art of Knossos stands unparalleled in the ancient world, devoid of the typical glorifications of warfare or the stoic visages of kings and battle-hardened heroes. Here the canvas comes alive with nature's vibrancy, leaping dolphins, lilies in bloom, birds soaring, and sacred bulls. The humans depicted are not merely alive, but vibrant, often caught in the act of dance or ritual, their movements imbued with an elegance that even scenes of potential peril carry a rhythm and a beauty. The Minoans, it seems, did not chronicle conquest, but celebrated the cycles of life, perhaps even the cosmic order itself. Amidst this, the double axe or labri emerges as a potent symbol found in shrines, frescoes, and etched into stones. It might have represented a connection to female divinity or celestial cycles. Could it be that the labyrinth itself, often thought of as a confusing maze, was actually a house of the double axe, a sacred space rather than a trap? And then there are the horns of consecration, stylized bullhorns perched atop walls and altars, demarcating the sacred from the profane. Combined with the pervasive imagery of bulls and the rituals surrounding them, it's evident the animal held profound spiritual significance. Was it a symbol of nature, fertility, chaos, or a divine entity? The consensus eludes us, but one fact remains irrefutable. The bull is ubiquitous, its presence echoing through the very layout of this ancient sanctuary. The enigmatic Konos, with its labyrinthine corridors and nested chambers, may whisper secrets not merely of its own design, but of the cosmos itself. Some archaeologists argue that its creation was not just for practical use, but to reflect the dance of stars or the cycle of seasons. Imagine as you tread its paths that each turn could symbolize a passage through life, death, or the shadowy realms of the underworld, a spiritual pilgrimage rather than a mere physical entrapment. Yet without a deciphered script, our theories teeter on the edge of insight and the realm of fantasy. The Minoans spoke in symbols, not stories, leaving us to decipher the riddles they left behind. What stories does Konos tell us? We hear its rhythms, see its images, yet the true meaning dances just beyond our grasp like a thread unraveling into myth. Konos may be in ruins, but it pulses with a life of its own. Walk its halls today and you'll feel something vibrant just beneath the surface. Not the presence of spirits or deities, but the echoes of myths of lives once lived, of questions that persist through the ages. Centuries after its demise, Konos still captivates us in its intricate maze. Tourists meander through its corridors, archaeologists unearth its secrets, and writers weave new legends inspired by its enduring mystery. The Minotaur might be a myth, but the sensation of being ensnared within a labyrinth is palpably real. We know not who governed Konos, nor the names of its monarchs, priests, or revered figures. Their prayers, their laws are lost to us. Yet we understand they cherished beauty, revered nature, and harmonized architecture with art, ritual, with reality. And we recognize they were pioneers. Before the Parthenon, before Rome, before the Hebrew temples or Persian palaces, there was Konos, a palace that was also a city that was also a temple that perhaps was a narrative. For maybe that's what the labyrinth truly signifies, a journey, not a confinement. Ah, the labyrinthine corridors of Knossos, where history and myth intertwine like the very threads of Ariadne's tale. This ancient site, with its enigmatic bull rituals, stands as a testament to human curiosity and the eternal quest for understanding. The Minotaur's legend, born from these very stones, whispers to us through the ages, a haunting echo of our ancestors' attempts to fathom the unfathomable. In the bright light of today, we tread these ruins, capturing their essence in photographs, sketching their mysterious frescoes, and piecing together fragments of what once was. Yet the enigma of Knossos persists, its truth shimmering like a mirage, elusive and ever-changing. Perhaps this is why Knossos continues to captivate us. It does not surrender its secrets easily. It beckons us not to solve, but to feel, to immerse ourselves in its half-remembered stories. And so we ponder, what is Knossos, if not a living question, an invitation to delve deeper with every step. Like Theseus, we too are bound by an invisible thread, pulled through history's maze, seeking not just answers, but the essence of experience itself. Meanwhile, consider the ancient engineers, those masterminds of warfare, who transformed simple tools into instruments of dread. The earliest rams were crude, wielded by soldiers like frenzied lumberjacks, their collective strength smashing against enemy defenses. But evolution in warfare brought sophistication. The ram became more than a tool, it became a harbinger of terror. Mounted on wheels, often with protective roofs to shield from arrows and boiling oil, it advanced menacingly. The Assyrians with their siege towers elevated this terror. Their rams, now equipped with pointed iron tips, rolled ominously toward the gates of defiant cities, a relentless force under the cover of archers' fire. Relief carvings from Nineveh immortalized these moments where the siege engines, like slow-moving behemoths, heralded the end of resistance. Thus, through the corridors of time, from the mythic to the martial Knossos and its echoes, remind us that history is not just to be understood, but deeply felt, its questions compelling us ever onwards. Ah, the gods of destruction. Their wrath was not confined to mere front doors. No, they sought to dismantle the very essence of fortification. Imagine, if you will, the relentless pounding of battering rams, not merely at the gates, but against the very walls and watchtowers, each strike a thunderous echo of impending doom. Surrender or watch your defenses crumble like the driest, stalest bread. The Greeks, with their ingenuity, refined these tools of siege, but it was the Romans who truly perfected this art of destruction. Their engineers crafted colossal rams named Ares for their ram-like ferocity, hung from chains within massive siege shelters. Some of these behemoths required the strength of dozens to wield their swinging beams, creating a symphony of destruction like thunder rolling over stone. Yet for all their brute force, these battering rams demanded a symphony of teamwork. Operators had to synchronize their efforts, keeping the ram in motion, while fending off a barrage of firestones and unspeakable filth hurled down from above. A stalled ram was a dead ram, its wooden sinews stilled by the chaos of battle. But when it truly got going, oh, what a sight! It was an unstoppable force, wooden muscle against human masonry, a testament to ancient physics weaponized. This was but the prelude to the symphony of siege warfare. And then there was the catapult, the tactician of destruction. While rams engaged in close combat, catapults struck from afar, not only with stones but with fear itself. They were the first artillery revolutionizing warfare by harnessing physics in ways that seemed almost magical to those on the receiving end. Born from the brilliant minds of ancient Greece around the 4th century BCE, these machines of war, initially commissioned by Dionysius of Syracuse, a tyrant with a penchant for violent innovation, used twisted sinew or hair as tension springs far beyond mere slingshots. These were the early whispers of a new era in warfare, where distance and momentum became the new weapons of choice. In the realm of ancient warfare, giants of engineering prowess emerged, their very existence a testament to human ingenuity. These were not mere machines, but precise instruments of siege terror, their mechanics a marvel of human intellect. 127, 36, the brilliance of these devices lay in their intricate design. Engineers through the ages had discovered that by tightly twisting ropes, often crafted from animal sinew, they could harness vast amounts of potential energy. When unleashed, this force could send stones, javelins, or even blazing projectiles soaring through the air for hundreds of meters. The evolution of these war machines was swift. 227, 57, there were two principal types. The ballista, akin to a colossal crossbow which hurled massive bolts with terrifying precision, and the stone-throwing catapult, which lobbed boulders over walls or directly at fortifications with a thunderous crash. Enter the Romans, those ever-improving tinkerers of Greek ingenuity. They crafted catapults that could be disassembled, transported on carts, and reconstructed wherever they were needed. 128, 18. These portable siege engines became the hallmark of professional armies. Imagine some Roman catapults could launch 60-pound stones at such ferocious speeds they could shatter wooden gates, demolish battlements, and tragically, even unlucky soldiers caught in their path. Yet catapults served not only as tools of destruction, but as instruments of psychological warfare. Ancient generals with a grim flair for drama used them to send ominous messages. 128. 40 corpses were flung over walls to spread disease and terror, while severed heads were lobbed into besieged cities, breaking the spirit of the defenders. In a particularly macabre instance, diseased bodies were catapulted into enemy lands as a primitive form of biological warfare. However, these mighty machines had their Achilles heel. They were cumbersome, demanding skilled crews, and could be rendered ineffective by rough terrain. 129. Uri Uwa. Yet when positioned correctly, they could pummel a city into submission from a safe distance. For the first time, city fortifications realized that their robust stone walls had to endure more than just a battering ram. They needed to withstand the very skies destruction now came from, above a terrifying new reality. If the catapult was ingenious, the trebuchet was majestic. 129-25. Looming large, creaking ominously, it was the sovereign of medieval siege warfare. When a trebuchet appeared on the battlefield, it was not merely a weapon. It was a harbinger of doom, a symphony of destruction, a spectacle of power that could shake the very foundations of human resolve. A declaration bold and unyielding resounded through the ages. Your walls mean nothing. This was not a mere taunt, but a testament to the might of the trebuchet, a machine that stood apart from its tension-driven kin. At the heart of this formidable engine was a principle as old as gravity itself, a long, swinging arm mounted on a robust frame with a heavy counterweight on one end and a sling on the other. Imagine the drama as the weight is raised, the anticipation palpable, and then released. The arm would whip around, propelling the sling and its lethal cargo in a majestic high arc over enemy fortifications. It was destruction, yes, but with a precision and predictability that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The roots of the trebuchet stretch back to the 4th century BCE, where the Chinese first harnessed human power to launch projectiles. However, the true transformation came in the 12th century with the introduction of the counterweight trebuchet, likely through Byzantine or Muslim channels, which would soon redefine siege warfare across Europe and the Islamic world. Once Europe embraced this innovation, it spread like wildfire, igniting the imaginations and strategies of castle builders and crusaders alike. The sheer power of these machines was astonishing. A well-constructed trebuchet could hurl 300-pound projectiles over 300 meters, sending stones the size of furniture, crashing into towers, reducing walls to rubble, or shattering the resolve of those within. But here lies the magic, the art of the trebuchet, its ability to lob projectiles with such finesse that they could reach not just the walls, but the courtyards, barracks, and supply depots behind them. Imagine the scene, not just stones, but diseased animals burning pitch-blinding lime, or even messages of scorn wrapped around rocks soaring over defenses. One legendary tale from the siege of Stirling Castle in Scotland speaks of Warwolf, a trebuchet so colossal that the mere sight of it compelled surrender before it was even fired. Yet in a twist of irony, the king refused this surrender, eager to witness the machine's power firsthand. But for all its destructive prowess, the trebuchet was not swift. The process was deliberate, a slow dance of power and precision, each launch a statement of intent, a deliberate act of war. The trebuchet, an instrument of medieval dread, required hours to construct, mere minutes to reload, and demanded the expertise of skilled engineers. Yet no other weapon of siege could match its range, its force, or the sheer psychological terror it instilled. Picture it, the earth trembling as the counterweight plummeted, cities gasping in unison, their hearts in their throats. This was no mere weapon. It was a slow-motion hammer from the heavens, a harbinger of doom. While catapults flung their payloads from a distance and battering rams pounded at the gates with brute force, the siege tower took a more intimate, almost personal approach. Rolling up to the enemy's doorstep like a mobile fortress, it was a wooden skyscraper on wheels cloaked in wet hides to resist the flames of war, bristling with archers and spearmen. Imagine the sight, a behemoth of war machinery, the ancient counterpart to today's armored personnel carriers, ready to disgorge its deadly cargo right at your doorstep. When one of these titans began its ominous advance toward your city walls, the air would thicken with anticipation. You knew with chilling certainty that the real battle was about to commence. Siege towers were not subtle. They were bold, massive, and terrifyingly effective when wielded with precision. The Assyrians might have pioneered their use back in the 9th century BCE, but it was the Greeks and especially the Hellenistic kingdoms who elevated their design to an art form of terror. Take, for instance, the Siege of Rhodes in 305 BCE, where the Macedonian general Demetrius, in a display of ambition that was as grand as it was audacious, constructed the Helepolis, the taker of cities. This 9-story leviathan stood over 100 feet tall, festooned with catapults armored in iron plates and propelled by the sheer muscle of thousands. It was an architectural marvel, a testament to human ingenuity, yet it succumbed to its own colossal weight. But oh, the ambition! The very essence of siege towers was straightforward. Yet profound walls are only as good as their ability to keep invaders out. These towering structures negated that advantage by providing an elevated platform from which attackers could descend upon the battlements, bypassing the need for gates or scaling ladders. From their lofty decks, archers could unleash a deadly rain upon the defenders below, while troops on the lower levels geared up for the assault. What a spectacle, what a strategy, what a time of war! Ah, the mighty siege towers. These colossal structures, lumbering giants on the battlefield, were not the indomitable fortresses they appeared to be. Slow and ponderous, they were as vulnerable as a tortoise crossing a battlefield strewn with traps. Imagine the scene, mud sucking at their wheels, fire arrows raining down like fiery vengeance, and defenders rolling boulders or sabotaging the terrain to halt their advance. Clever defenders didn't just sit and wait. They dug trenches, flooded moats, or erected secondary inner walls known as counterscarp defenses, all to thwart the tower's menacing approach. Yet when these behemoths succeeded, oh, what a spectacle. A mere breach in the wall was one thing, but to have enemy soldiers suddenly atop your own ramparts, that was chaos incarnate. Siege towers turned the battlefield into a vertical arena, where height became both your greatest ally and your direst foe. The moment the gangplank clattered down from the tower to the city walls, retreat was no longer an option. It was hand-to-hand combat or nothing. But while rams pounded and trebuchets flung their deadly loads, a more insidious siege tactic was unfolding beneath the very feet of the besieged. Siege tunneling or sapping was the silent assassin of warfare, a method so ancient and yet so terrifyingly effective. The strategy was simple yet diabolical: dig beneath the enemy's wall, support the earth with wood, then ignite it. As the timbers turned to ash, the tunnel would collapse, bringing down not just the supports, but the very foundation of the wall itself. One moment the city stood proud and defiant. The next, a section of the wall crumbled like the husk of an overripe fruit. This wasn't the spectacle of grand engines or the roar of thunderous launches. Tunneling was the quiet, relentless killer in fortress warfare. While the Assyrians dabbled in this dark art, it was the Greeks, Persians, and later the medieval European armies who perfected this subterranean strategy. Picture the siege of Plataea in 429 BCE, where Spartans dug beneath the walls only for the defenders to counter with their own tunnels, intercepting and thwarting the invaders in a subterranean chess match. Thus, the battlefield was not just a place of visible might, but a stage for the unseen, where the earth itself could be turned against the mightiest of walls. Imagine the ground beneath your feet turning into a stage for a knife fight, the very soil transformed into an arena of nightmares. This defensive maneuver, known as countermining, introduced a chilling aspect to the grim theater of siege warfare. Picture this: soldiers shrouded in the inky darkness, burrowing hundreds of feet under the earth, their ears straining for the faint, ominous tapping of enemy picks. The moment that sound reached them, they would surge forward, racing against time and terror to intercept, leading to violent, claustrophobic clashes, illuminated only by flickering torches, where knives and shovels became weapons of desperation. There was no honor in these subterranean battles, only the palpable fear of suffocation and the relentless embrace of the earth. But when undermining succeeded, the consequences were nothing short of cataclysmic. One of the most notorious instances unfolded during the siege of Rochester Castle in England in 1212. King John's engineers dug beneath the southern wall, filling the tunnel with pig fat, and ignited it. The supports crumbled, sending the entire tower crashing down in a spectacle of destruction. The defenders, caught off guard, soon found themselves overwhelmed and capitulated. By the 13th century, siege engineers had evolved into a breed apart: geologists and demolition experts, in one with a knack for pinpointing structural weaknesses, understanding the soil's temperament, and orchestrating collapses with chilling precision. Tunneling demanded time, toil, and a touch of insanity, yet it underscored an immutable truth of siege warfare. If the wall could not be scaled or breached, it could always be brought down from beneath. Yet not all the drama of siege warfare was orchestrated by the besiegers. For every battering ram constructed or siege tower advanced, the defenders had their own arsenal of deadly ingenuity. And sometimes these defenses were as fiery as they were fearsome. Let's delve into the most daunting of these Greek fire. Developed by the Byzantines around the 7th century CE, this was a mysterious napalm-like concoction that could adhere to ships' walls and flesh, continuing to burn even on water. Launched from siphons or thrown in clay pots, it painted scenes of sheer pandemonium. To this, how could one not wonder what else could possibly turn the tide of war? In the annals of history, no one can truly grasp the enigma of its creation. The formula shrouded in secrecy perished alongside the empire, yet its effects remain the stuff of legends. Picture this entire fleet's once mighty and indomitable, reduced to nothing but smoldering skeletons in mere minutes. And this was merely the opening act of a grim symphony. When it came to more primitive defenses, the defenders turned to the elemental fury of boiling liquids. From the heights of gateways or towers through quaintly named murder holes, they would unleash torrents of boiling water, oil, or sand upon the unsuspecting invaders below. Oil, oh the horror of oil. Unlike water, it did not simply wash away. It clung to the skin, seeping into clothes and armor, igniting into a relentless inferno. Imagine, dear reader, the terror of ascending a siege ladder only to be met with a fire that refuses to be quenched. And then there was the insidious sand, less theatrical, yet equally cruel. It would find its way into the smallest gaps of armor around the neck or wrists, cooking the flesh beneath until it was nothing but charred agony. From afar, it might seem unremarkable, but up close, it transformed brave warriors into writhing, screaming shadows of their former selves. Defenders not content with mere fire and heat also harnessed the laws of physics. Gravity, the silent ally, was turned into a weapon. Enormous stones, logs, or even the carcasses of beasts were hurled from parapets, targeting not just the flesh of the enemy, but the very machinery of war, breaking both bodies and spirits simultaneously. Yet the battlefield was not just about physical might, it was a maze of pain. Hidden pits, collapsing bridges, and spiked barricades turned the castle into a labyrinth designed to maim, confuse, and delay. Each defense, each trap served the singular purpose of buying time. Every moment the walls stood firm was a moment closer to the depletion of enemy supplies, to the spread of disease in their camps, or to the arrival of much-needed reinforcements. Siege warfare was a brutal dance of attrition where the attackers wielded the power of physics, but the defenders responded with a deadly concoction of creativity and seething fury. In the grueling game of siege warfare, the goal was twofold, not merely to pulverize stone and timber, but to crush the spirit of those huddled behind the fortress walls. Siege engines were not mere tools. They were colossal, groaning behemoths of destruction, each a harbinger of doom. Every creak of a siege tower's wheel, every boulder sent soaring through the air by a trebuchet was meticulously designed to sow a single chilling thought in the defenders' minds. You are not safe. The ancient commanders, with their profound understanding of human fear, orchestrated this spectacle with a maestro's touch. The Assyrians, with their brazen displays of siege engines, paraded through arid deserts, and the Romans, who constructed their camps in plain sight, allowing the enemy to witness the assembly of battering rams and the calibration of catapults, knew all too well that siege was not just a battle, but a grand theater where fear was the most potent weapon. At times, the payloads launched over the walls carried more than just physical devastation. They bore a message of terror. Severed heads of messengers or generals still adorned in their armor would be catapulted, a gruesome testament to the fate awaiting the besieged. During the siege of Constantinople, the defenders faced not only stones, but the macabre rain of bodies. The Mongols, in their siege of Kaffa in 1346, are believed to have hurled plague-infected corpses, a sinister tactic that may have sparked the catastrophic spread of the Black Death across Europe. The trebuchet was not just an instrument of war, it was a declaration, an ominous prelude. When one of these behemoths was wheeled into position, its presence was felt before seen. The sounds it made, the creaking of winches, the straining of ropes, the thunderous drop of the counterweight echoed like the ominous heartbeat of an impending storm. But perhaps the most unnerving aspect was the unpredictability. What would come next? A rock, a blazing barrel, a volley of arrows, or just the oppressive silence of engineers realigning their aim. This uncertainty, this silence became as much a weapon as the projectiles themselves. The rhythmic pounding of a battering ram or the eerie silence before a shot could drive defenders to the brink of madness with the unbearable tension of anticipation. For commanders, the strategy was to sow despair, to make the enemy feel forsaken by their gods, to convince them that their walls were but fleeting barriers against the relentless march of destiny. And when the mental fortress finally crumbled, the city gates often swung open without resistance. In siege warfare, sometimes the psyche surrendered long before the stones. As gunpowder roared onto the battlefield in the waning days of the medieval era, the age of traditional siege engines met a gradual splintering demise. Yet their legacy did not simply fade into oblivion, it transformed. The advent of cannons revolutionized warfare. A single precisely aimed cannon shot could accomplish in moments what a trebuchet might labor hours to achieve. Stone fortifications once deemed unassailable became vulnerabilities. By the dawn of the 15th century, Europe's majestic castles began to crumble, not from the slow sap of undermining or the ravages of fire, but from the brutal force of iron cannonballs piercing through their parapets. Siege warfare had surged into a new era, explosive, fierce, and deafening. And yet the foundational principles established by ancient siege engineers persisted. Modern artillery still pays homage to the catapult and trebuchet. Every ballistic missile and long-range howitzer stands as a sophisticated descendant of the age-old question, how does one shatter what is meant to be unbreakable from afar? The laws of physics, trajectory, calculations, tension, and force were all explored, tested, and honed centuries before gunpowder even entered the narrative. Even the military psychology of today, with its shock and awe, overwhelming firepower, and visible dominance, finds its origins in the ancient siege tactics. Those towering siege engines, flags snapping in the wind as they advanced, were the original shock and awe. They were not merely about breaking walls, they were about shattering the spirit of an entire city. As you delve deeper into history, you can still feel the legacy of ancient sieges etched into the very stones of bygone cities. Oh, to stand at Masada, where the Roman siege ramps still scar the desert sands, a testament to the relentless pursuit of conquest, in Constantinople, where walls stood as a bastion against the tides of war, for a millennium only to fall to the thunderous roar of cannon fire. Across Europe, castles whisper tales of survival through round towers and angled bastions, each a chapter in a relentless saga of adaptation and resilience. Now, in our era of drones and precision-guided missiles, one might wonder if siege warfare has truly vanished. Far from it, it has merely morphed into the digital realm. Cities are besieged not by physical armies, but by cyber attacks, blockades, and information sieges. The essence of the siege persists undiminished. Someone yearns to breach, to enter, to conquer. Conversely, someone else is equally determined to thwart, to protect, to preserve. Both sides are ready to endure, to innovate, and to ultimately prevail. The ancient battering rams and trebuchets have found their place in history, yet the spirit of siege warfare burns as fiercely as ever. This timeless battle for supremacy, for survival, continues to shape our world in ways both seen and unseen. We extend our heartfelt gratitude for joining us on this journey through time. Your engagement, your thoughts, and your passion fuel our mission. Please leave a comment, share your insights, like and subscribe to stay connected. Together, let's keep the conversation alive, for history is not just a record of the past, but a dialogue with the future.